February 14th, 2017, and this video is called Fukushima Ruined Seafood, TEPCO Should Be Sued. Now, the reason why they should be sued is I basically believe that the nuclear industry and TEPCO and Fukushima and Hillary and Shinzo Abe and President then Barack Obama totally destroyed the most important resource on our planet, and that's the seafood. Now, I used to treat myself to salmon about once a month as a treat, and because of this accident and cover-up of the truth, I don't eat seafood, and I haven't eaten seafood since 2011. And maybe you should think twice about eating it yourself, because I'm going to go into a couple facts about how cesium and strontium and all these evil isotopes are destroying your body and causing you cancer. Now I want you to take a very good look at this picture. This is a high definition picture after the multi-nuclear explosions that happened at Fukushima. Now this is reactor 4, this is 3, this is 2, and this is 1. As you can see, they are blown to smithereens. There is nothing left of these buildings. And you're trying to tell me that we're going to believe TEPCO and Obama and Hillary that everything is fine over here. This is actually unit number 2. A human has not been in this building since this happened. And there's a reason, because radiation levels are rising to the point where robots are breaking down in a matter of hours. There's probably spent fuel rods and who knows what laying all over the place over here. So this place is a mess. So let this image burn into your memory banks. Look at this mess over here. This is 100% total destruction of everything that was in a nuclear power plant. This basically looks like a house that caught on fire and was burning for days, and all that's left is basically charred rubble. Now, basically, this is what TEPCO released, a picture that is photoshopped. See the Photoshop in here? And now we're supposed to believe the truth on what's happening over there. Now there's the fish I used to eat. Some nice beautiful Alaskan salmon. Not anymore. You could have it. Because I'm telling you, there's little microscopic bits of radiation in here. And they're going to tell you it's at safe levels. Okay, this is an article from Time magazine. And you're going to realize that just like Time and NPR and PBS, that you could tell that somehow they're sticking up for the nuclear industry. Now, this article is the lingering effects of Fukushima on fish. Now, nearly 5 years have passed since the earthquake and tsunami in Japan killed 16,000 people and caused a nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. New research now suggests that the radiation released by the nuclear disaster may have a lingering effect on fish, but that the risk posed to human beings from consumption, thanks in part to strong regulation, is minimal. Fisheries in most areas affected remain closed, but even if someone were to eat fish with relatively high levels of radiation, the chances of consuming enough to cause any serious damage remain extremely low. Now, this is a trend you will see in a lot of articles. that downplay the seriousness of eating bits of radioactive materials. This study, called Risk Assessment of Radioisotope Contamination for Aquatic Living Resources in and Around Japan, states food contamination caused by the radioisotopes released from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is of great public concern. The contamination risk for food items should be estimated depending on the characteristics and geographic environments of each item. However, evaluating current and future risk for food items is generally difficult because of small sample sizes, high detection limits, and insufficient survey periods. Now, the body sees radioactive elements as being almost identical to normal plant or animal minerals such as magnesium, potassium, iodine, or iron, so it just absorbs them and tries to use them. However, man-made radioactive elements are poisonous heavy metals, and they are radioactive, acting like machine guns, firing in all directions inside the body, destroying and damaging DNA plus cells, thus causing cancers and disease. Radioactive cesium mimics potassium, which goes to the muscles and specifically to the heart. Radioactive uranium mimics magnesium. Now, magnesium is needed for more than 300 biochemical reactions in the body. It helps maintain normal nerve and muscle function, supporting a healthy immune system, keeps the heart beating steady, and helps bones remain strong. It also helps regulate blood glucose levels and aid in a production of energy and protein. Radioactive iodine mimics iodine, which goes to the thyroid gland. Radioactive plutonium mimics iron, which goes to the bones, liver, and blood cells. Radioactive strontium mimics calcium, which goes to the bones and teeth. Hundreds of other radioactive elements act in the same way, each one damaging a different part of the body. Now, this is from the fish site. It's called The Face of Japan's Clear Sea as of 2016. It's one of Japan's main seafood and agricultural firms. It just talks about how they farm and grow the fish. But I thought what was interesting is this part about the farming of this Red Sea bream. It says a specially formulated diet rich in shrimp, squid meal, and sand lance is pumped through the feeding hose into pens, while an underwater camera monitors feeding behavior so that feed amounts and frequency can be adjusted accordingly. Uneaten feed and waste are also collected and pumped back to the surface. Now, remember, this is what they're feeding them, the sand lance. The U.S. seafood is safe and unaffected by radiation contamination from Japanese nuclear power plant incident. U.S. Monitoring Control Strategy explained. Monitoring the risk of contamination to migratory fish. The only Japanese fish with levels of radiation exceeding standards is the Japanese sand lance, which does not migrate away from the Japanese coast. Well, didn't I just read that this is exactly what they're feeding some of the fish as food? The Japanese sand lance. It states the FDA is performing field examinations for gamma-ray emitting radionuclides on approximately 40% of the seafood products that are being shipped to the United States. Okay, from March 21st, 2011 to April 25th, they examined close to 3,500 examinations. I'm going to show you that list, and it's basically down to nothing now. The FDA does not anticipate contamination of living marine resources in the United States waters at this time. For this reason, sampling of U.S. harvested seafood is not currently planned. There's a couple things that are going down with the Google Maps now, and they're starting to turn the satellite photos actually into cartoons, and they're getting more blurry. So I think Google Maps have caught on, and they're trying to get away and get rid of the resolution so you could see images that are clear, and they're fudging this to make them look like cartoons. But these are these. I wondered what these things are looking on the satellite pictures of Japan, and they're all over the place. And this is actually where they're fishing and raising the fish. They're all over the place. Now check this out. Look at this cartoon effect that they're putting on this stuff. See, these are the pens that they're growing the fish in. And I want you to go into this area right here real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about when I say that they are. We'll put the 3D in. And see how it's all looking like a cartoon now? So you can't see. I don't know what they're doing. They're pumping something over there. But look at all these bins that they grow fish in. Now here's the 3D effect. Look at how many fishing pens there are. But you're not be able to see the crispness of the pictures anymore because Google is turning them into cartoons. See, I'll show you real quick here. See how everything's all cartooned out? They're starting to get pretty smart now. They don't want us to see the detail on these maps anymore. See, now those are the ocean fish farms in Japan. It says yellowtail, salmon, sorrel, red sea brim, and this pufferfish are the main fish raised in ocean fish farms in Japan. Sometimes they are fed tuna waste solids. Fishermen in various coastal regions raise various species, including white salmon, red sea brim, and yellowtail. Now here are the prefectures that are the main fishing areas. This is Awate, and notice the locations. Now here is, of course, they got the bags of radioactive waste they're digging up. But if you check out way into the sea, see these little sticks that are sticking up here? Those are those fish farms. Here's another picture of them. See them up in here? That's where they're raising the fish. And you could see them out in the open over in here. But here's a close-up of them. And here's more of the fish farms. You could actually see one of the boats over here. Now this is in the middle of the island of Japan, but I'll show you where more of them are, right down the street from Fukushima. Now the problem with me of the seriousness of this, ended up doing a radiation study on the tuna in 2012. So as in order to test a hypothesis They collected tissue samples from young bluefin tuna that were caught off the coast of San Diego in August of 2011. So that was only like 5 months after the accident, and he sent him to a laboratory at the Stony Brook. They tested him for radioactive cesium. They thought it was unlikely they would find anything, but they were surprised. All of them had clear, detectable levels of cesium. Now, the radiation provides unequivocal evidence that the fish transported radioactivity across the Pacific Ocean. This is kind of like where I might differ. Furthermore, the ratio between the two isotopes of cesium allowed the scientists to determine that this particular group of bluefin tuna had left Japan approximately 4 months earlier, after spending less than a month in the contaminated waters near Japan. Well, this is where I would beg to differ, because how do we know exactly where those fish were? They just caught them on the coast of San Diego. They could have been anywhere in the Pacific Ocean over there. There's Japan, Fukushima. Here's San Diego. Now, you know how big this ocean is? I'm thinking that Fukushima is way more off the hook that they're leading on to, because every one of those tuna that they caught over here tested positive. Now, maybe this huge bath way more than they're leading on to, because I can't see how a little over a dozen fish are swimming in this pool over here, which is huge, and they all tested positive for radiation. I'm thinking that it's bleeding out a lot more than we know, and maybe we just don't know the properties of the dispersion of the radiation. Now, here's what I was talking about NPR and how I think they are pro-nuclear, because look at this ridiculous headline. It says, nuclear tuna is hot news, but not because it's going to make you sick. These are the shills in the nuclear industry. He talks about, Richard, he talks about what snarky headline writer could resist a story about hot tuna, or how about tuna meltdown? And while as a rule we avoid making light of nuclear disasters, the tuna story is actually just plain curious rather than threatening once you understand the context. It says, yes, radiation in seafood seems scary, but there's a catch. If you pardon the expression, they're trying to make such a joke out of this. Tuna, like every other food on the planet, already contains naturally occurring radiation, potassium-40 and polonium-210. It always has, and it always will. In addition, seafood in general contains trace elements of cesium left over from the nuclear weapons testing from the 50s and 60s. So the question was, how much more radiation did this particular tuna fish contain? They basically boil it down to, if you're worried about the cesium from Fukushima, you'd have to eat 2.5 to 4 tons of tuna a year to get a dose of cesium that exceeds the health limits. That's a lot of sushi. Well, maybe the health limits shouldn't be, I think it's 1,200 becquerels. Maybe it actually would be a little bit lower, because just a couple pieces of this stuff is bad for you. Now, here's a study of the fisheries in Awake after the Fukushima nuclear accident and the lessons for coastal management under conditions of high uncertainty. Now, it just talks about the driving perception of risk and uncertainty in the fisheries in the city, in Fukushima Prefecture. And basically they're stating that commercial coastal fisheries have been stopped since efforts to understand and monitor the effects of the radiation contamination continue. Small-scale trial fisheries have, however, recommenced with a view to gradually restarting Fukushima fisheries over time. Now, remember this prefecture, Awake, because I'm going to show you where it's at. Now, here is Awake. Here's the prefecture. Now, check this out. where it's at. Because Fukushima is right over here. The nuclear power plant is over here. And this has been bleeding into the ocean for 6 years now. Look how close this place is. And the reason why I bring it up is this Fukushima on the globe. It's a portal site connecting Fukushima and the world. It says fish from Awakai were traded at the fish market in Tokyo for the first time since the nuclear crisis began. Fishery products from there were traded on March 9th. It says a total of 1.6 tons of flatfish, octopus, and other seafood caught the previous day in trial trawling off the coast. It says before being put up for auction, the fishery products underwent voluntary checks for radioactivity levels by the City Fishery Association and other parties. Get this, while 13 becquerels per kilogram were detected from the flounder and readings for the green eyes were below detectable levels. Now, from this article, of course, National Geographic, another shill, Fukushima's radioactive water leak. What should you know? I wanted to point this out. The leaking continues. It says, but most experts seem to think that ordinary movement of groundwater probably is the real culprit. Now, it's estimated that 400 tons, which is 95,000 gallons, which is 365,000 liters of water, stream into the basement of the damaged reactor each day. Each day, 365,000 liters each day. Now remember that, because I'm going to show you a comparison. So 95,000 gallons a day. Here is the American Niagara Falls. The volume of water is 150,000 gallons a second is coming over this. Okay, now if you do the math, let's do the math. 150,000 gallons a second is coming out. 150,000 gallons. 95,000 gallons a day is coming out. So basically, the equivalent, that was basically about half of this, or actually a little bit more, probably 60%. 95,000 gallons a day, and 150,000 gallons come over the falls in a second. So imagine these waterfalls right here, the amount of water that comes over this in a half a second, which is basically probably what it takes for it to come from the top and hit to the bottom. That amount of water right here is what's coming through the basements of Fukushima in a day. And it's been going on over 2,000 plus days. So that is a ton of radioactive water that is being flushed into the ocean a day. That is a mind-blowing thought right there. In 1 second, 150,000 gallons come over here. And 90,000 gallons a day is coming out of Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean. All right, so according to the paper right here, I'm not going to butcher that name up, but as of September 11th, 2016, 83 species now eligible for test fishing off coast of Fukushima. It says 10 species were added to the list of catches eligible for test fishing off the coast of Fukushima Prefecture but lingering concerns about radiation are keeping sales of such products low. The Japan Times: Awate fisheries continue struggle to recover. I don't know the date on this, but I found this interesting, that the fishermen primarily catch salmon and harvest kelp, abalone, and wakame seaweed. Now, this is all the stuff that grows in the water. Now, look at where Awate is. And here's Fukushima. Now, you don't think with 2,000 plus days of 400 tons of radioactive water pouring into this ocean over here, and actually I think the currents push it up over here, that radiation isn't settling in these crevices where they're probably doing all this fishing at. Oh yeah, there they are. See them? That's where they that's where they raise the fish. Here's the fish farms over here. Isn't that crazy? And here's the trawlers. See that pole right in here? They're all over the place. This is where they're growing the fish at in these waters. Oh my God, look at this. There's just tons of them. Look at how many there are. Let's go 3D. Oh boy, there you go. There's... Oh, look at how we went 3D. Of these fishing areas where they're growing the fish at. Here's the boats. This is them right in here. Look how many there are. They're everywhere. See how many there are? Now here's the holding pens, these circles. See, these are different kind of holding pens, but this is where they're raising fish in also. But see where it's at over here? Fukushima is right over here. So all that water is bleeding out in here, soaking all this water up. Yep, there they are. It's a good look over in here. These are the pens. I don't know exactly what species of fish, but this is where they're growing them at. And here they are over in here. So this is why I wouldn't touch seafood, especially if it's coming out of Japan. Holy crap-oly. All right, let's zoom in. On these areas where they're fishing. I find these things interesting. I didn't know what the heck they were at the beginning. But here's the 3D view of them. These are all the pens where they're growing the fish at. See them? Picking up the fish that they're catching in these pens. Isn't that wild? And they're everywhere, these fishing pens. Now I don't know what specific fish that they're catching. You go up and down these areas, they're everywhere though. See them? They're growing a ton of fish out there. My concern though is the location of these pens. Looks like there's some more over here. Whoa, jackpot. Now I'm wondering if this is some of that's. This might be reflections off the water, but I always was wondering all this white stuff that's in here, if this is actually some of the debris from the tsunami. Let's go 3D now. Well, this is a big area of them. See those pens? That's where they're growing your fish at. Problem is look where these pens are at. See them all over here. Look at the location of these pens. We gotta turn this around. Sorry about that. Here's Fukushima. Those are pens are all over here, this Kinkasen Island. And you can't tell me that Fukushima water and that radiation is just flowing and just hanging out in here. I'll tell you what, I will bet that the citizens of Japan are basically living in La La Land. There's some of them over here. I wanted to find that area that I just seen. Oh, there they are. See them? They're everywhere. There's a little boat. You tell me. What are they fishing in here? What are they growing in there? Thing is, though, if you think about it, if it was just regular fish, they would be having a large area of freedom of the water. But actually, these are pens, so they're actually trapped in here. Let's see if we can find some interesting stuff. All right, you get the message. And actually, let me tell you, because I thought I made a mistake. This building here that they're doing, they're not building this to conceal it. Actually, they're building it because this building's about to fall apart and fall over. So they're trying to build a frame around it to keep it from crumbling. Holy moly, there's the 3D of it. Look at all the concrete they're pouring. And it looks like there's a bunch of bags over there. Look at all the radioactive bags. Holy moly, this place is scary. Now, this is a good example to show you. See these mountains? All that water is coming down here, and it's flowing through this site, making its way into the ocean here. And it's just, these tanks are loaded with radiation, and then they end up dumping it in the ocean. And then where do you got the people living? Can't see how they're living too close around here, but you never know. Alright, you get the point. Isn't it amazing? This little spot right over here at the base of these mountains is enough to fuck up that planet. And look at right over here. Doesn't this look like a skull? There's the eyeballs. Even the Earth is trying to tell us something. It's dying. It wants our help. That are supposedly reporting on the environment and wildlife. They write articles that say radiation from Fukushima is probably in your sushi, but it isn't going to kill you. Radioactivity in seafood that comes from near the wrecked nuclear power plant is well below the level for concern. And then you got these morons that suggest, now a newly published study suggests that there is nothing much to worry about. And that's March 17th, 2015. FDA, Fukushima radionuclide and food update as of March 10th, 2014. And this is what they tested for fiscal year 2011. Now here's 2014. We could count them on one page. All right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 pieces of food they tested in 2014. And it says it's not detected. Well, that sounds great until you look at the benchmark right here. It's very tiny. It's on the very last page. That the benchmark for cesium radioactivity, the FDA DIL, I'll show you what that means, is 1200 becquerels. The observed level for this sample does not pose a public health concern because it's only a concern if it tests 1201 or higher. So anything that tests 1199 and below is deemed safe, that it doesn't pose a public health concern. Now that is where the devil is in the details, that number right there. So you're going to try to tell us that it's safe. I wouldn't want to eat it with 1 becquerel per kilogram, let alone 11.99. This is exactly why I don't eat seafood. It's probably in a lot of other stuff, but it's guaranteed to be in seafood. All right, now here is where they decide what is safe. The regulatory action guidance. It says that FDA uses DILs, which is the derived intervention level, to help determine whether domestic food in interstate commerce or food offered for import into the U.S. presents a safety concern. Now, this is what they've deemed for each radionuclide group. Strontium-90, iodine-131, cesium-134 and 137, plutonium-238, 239, plus this americanium 241 and ruthenium-103 and 106. C, whatever, daughter. That might be a daughter cell or whatever. So anyways, they're saying that you could have, once it hits 160 for becquerels a kilogram, it's unsafe. But 159 is safe. For iodine-131, it's 170. For cesium, 1200. And actually, look at, they believe that is not safe to eat 2 becquerels of plutonium per kilogram, but it's safe to eat 1. All right, now here's the definition of a becquerel. Now, it's a standard or a system unit derived of radioactivity. 1 becquerel is defined as the activity of the quantity of radioactive material in which 1 nucleus decays per second. So if the level was 1200 becquerels, you're actually having 1200 decays a second in 1 kilogram, if that's right. So they're allowing 1199 decays a second of that radiation that is considered safe. That means that's 1 busy piece of food if it's decaying 1199 times. It don't seem safe to me. It seems scary to eat something like that. And when you look at what all that stuff is doing, it goes straight into your bones. It's mimicking all these nutrients, calcium, and your body can't tell the difference between the two. So what it says is, hey, we got ourselves some calcium, even though it's fooled, and it's going to store it in your bones or in your teeth or wherever in your body. And then that's what creates the cancer. All right, so I wanted to figure out how many kilograms are actually in a pound. So actually, in the equivalent is 2 pounds is equal to 1 kilogram. So actually, if you had that kind of radiation in 2 pounds of meat or salmon or fish, you could have up to 1199 of those what do we say? It was nucleus decay per second, which is kind of crazy. That's like actually only in 1 second you're allowed to have that many nucleus decays. So if it's sitting around, that piece is sitting around and look at how long it takes for you to digest that thing. So it's actually, it's almost like a jackpot. You put in 1 coin and you're going to get 1,000 coins back, because when you have this becquerel, that means 1 nucleus decays per second. So if your piece is actually deemed safe, you're having 1199 decays in a second, and you eat 2 pounds of fish that has this in it. That means every second that it's in your stomach, it's decaying 1199 times a second. Now here's the general overall history of this aquaculture in Japan. And they've been doing this since 100 BC. These irrigation ponds, ditches, commercial aquaculture. They've been doing it a long time. And here's the different species: amberjack, eels, shellfish, prawn, seaweed, pearls, nori, which is a type of seaweed. All kinds of stuff. They've been doing this for thousands of years. And isn't it amazing that one frickin' accident just can ruin it all? Unbelievable. Tuna, amberjack. It says floats and ropes are also commonly used as buoyant structures to suspend cultured shellfish and Japanese kelp. Floats are used for oysters, scallops, pearl oysters, abalone, etc., etc. Cage culture is commonly used for finfish aquaculture. Cage culture can be divided into 2 different methods: the floating method, the rope method. With the floating method, net cages are suspended under floats made of wood, bamboo, steel pipes, or plastic tubes. Standard sizes of the cages in the floating method are 5 by 5 meters or 10 by 10. This method offers easy maintenance, but is vulnerable to waves. With the rope method, net cages are attached by ropes to buoyant devices and moored to anchors or concrete blocks. These can be used for large-scale cage culture of larger fishes such as tuna and amberjack. I'm pretty sure that is what is out in the ocean there, those long bins and those circle cages. Here's the most scariest part of it all. Tokyo researchers, radioactive plankton are so heavily contaminated, food chain fears continuously carried southward from Fukushima. Now, the reason why that's scary is because the bottom of the food chain is basically plankton. Now, the microscopic marine plants take up the radioisotopes from the seawater around them, and then it's eaten by smaller creatures until it moves up the food chain. Contaminants move up the food chain from phytoplankton to tiny marine animals, fish larvae, fish, and larger predators. Different radioisotopes are taken up at different rates by different species, and it ends up falling down to the ground in their feces. And then it's just a vicious cycle. So it works its way up the food chain, and it kind of sucks that plankton is actually the very bottom of the food chain. So if this leaking continues for hundreds of years, eventually this stuff is going to work its way into every piece of food on the planet. And I guess that's the scariest part of it all. Top official: over 60 million Japanese irradiated by Fukushima. Nuclear expert, not a shill, an expert. 50,000 square miles of Japan highly contaminated. Many millions need to be evacuated. Government has decided to sacrifice them. It's a serious crime. More than 70% of the country is contaminated. And this is as of April 12th, 2016. It's 2017, and it's probably got about 10,000 years before it peaks. By then, if they don't do anything, if they stop the water flowing under it, it's just going to disintegrate the ground around it and create more havoc. And if they let the water flow, it's going to just be a slow death for the island and also for the world.